co-chair and also co-chair. So that's a long answer, I realize, but I thought it's important for you to understand the whole history. I'm sorry, I had to give you the background. Right.
You didn't answer the question for me, really. His question, you still didn't answer the question. Not.
I didn't answer his question?
No, sir, you talked on and on and on and on.
Well, I mean, I think you asked me how I came to name Robin Hayes, and that's what I was giving you the background.
There's a lot of background. You were very honest, I think, and open with it. I understand. I mean, it was, and I've got recording. I'm sure I can listen to it. It was long, but I do appreciate you taking the time to carry us down that path.
Sure. Sorry. Thank you. Yes.
Speaking of the marriage amendment, I'm curious about, since you've mentioned the role of government and how we feel like you feel like it should be smaller instead of bigger. My understanding of the history of government's involvement in marriage is that marriage licenses were initially issued in order to prevent interracial marriage, and that it wasn't even that long ago that they started doing that, issuing marriage licenses. And I believe the same as you, that marriage is between one man and one woman, and it's an institution of God, and that it's a religious institution. So if marriage is indeed a religious institution, which I think you believe it is, why should we continue to allow the government to have any say at all in marriage when we could just demand that they stop and have nothing at all to do with it and only issue civil union licenses?
Well, one of the reasons that I was a strong proponent of the marriage amendment was not only because of my convictions, but also because I understand the social and the cultural environment we're living in. And bottom line, the marriage amendment protects children. Marriage, at its deepest root, is a religious commitment between a man and a woman, but we also understand that it is for children. And children do best when they have a mama and a daddy. We know that. There's study after study that puts that out. And the marriage amendment is our way of preserving that and as part of our laws, because the government does have a vested interest in our children and making sure that taking care of the most innocent among us. So that's a part of it that really was a driving force with me, besides just the religious conviction that marriage is between a man and a woman.
I have a follow-up question to that. Because of the two-parent situation and that you believe in that's the primary focus of marriage is for the children, why didn't you focus on more making it harder to get divorced?
Well, listen, as pastor of a church, I try to fight divorce at every turn and try to bring marriages back together. And I've spent 24 and a half years trying to walk through life with people doing just that. But again, for the children, that issue was brought to us. I think that's important to understand, that we began to see things happen around this country with same-sex marriage that was happening in state after state after state. Activist judges were being more and more active about taking laws. Just when folks say, well, we really didn't need an amendment, we already had a law, all you got to do is just in the last 10 days, look up to New Jersey, because you've even got Governor Christie, who doesn't believe in same-sex marriage, and he's wrestling now with an issue because a judge has struck down their law. They don't have a constitutional amendment, and they're about to face this tragedy in New Jersey. So again, the marriage amendment itself was about the importance of the preservation of the family, and particularly in caring for children. I'm going to commit to you to do all I can to try to bring down the number of divorces in this country, and have spoken against it and preached against it many times that I could, helping people through it. And I think when you find people who have been divorced, oftentimes they're the leading proponents that can talk about the hurt and the struggle and the damage that comes from it, and they don't want to see it either. And so that's where I've come. Question right here.
Okay, what about, we saw in the last presidential election, the Republican side, you saw a bunch of people just beating the heck out of each other. I mean, just, and what about your race that you're going and the people that are running? I don't want to see that again. It just, they're beating themselves up, and Kay Hagen's sitting over there having lunch.
I agree.
In other words, she's doing nothing
Sure.
because those people over there, they're taking care of themselves.
Well, and we're going to have to guard ourselves because that's what the media wants. The media
Okay.
wants to bring that up. Yesterday, I did announce my candidacy across the state, and I started in Wilmington at 8:30 yesterday morning. Went from Concord to Wilmington, Wilmington to Newbern, Newbern to Raleigh, Raleigh to Greensboro, Greensboro to Asheville, and then Asheville back to Charlotte. And that's where we ended last night. And at just about every stop, when it was a press conference and I dealt with the media, immediately that question was immediately posed to me to try to put me on the attack against the other candidates, Republican candidates in here. And I had to be disciplined and I had to be guarded to say, I'm running against Kay Hagen. Kay Hagen is the problem in Washington, D.C., and it is her votes that we're going to continue to bring up. She is the one that we must defeat. And I think it's going to be important in this primary for all the candidates involved to do that. And at the end of the primary, it's going to be even more critical for all of us to be able to come together and work together to defeat Kay Hagen. The worst tragedy would be for all of us to work our fingers to the bone and to struggle and then still let her retain that seat. That would be the tragedy of all tragedies. And I hope and pray that that doesn't happen. And believe you me, I have a great appreciation for anybody who is willing to step into a race like this, because I can tell you the wear and tear on your body, wear and tear on your car, and the wear and tear on your time is quite a sacrifice that anybody makes to get in a statewide race. And I appreciate all the candidates that are doing that. Back here.
You talk about being pro-small government, not wanting,
Go ahead, I'll get some.
not wanting the Department of Education, not thinking that the Department of Education should be necessary, yet you say that the federal government has a vested interest in our children. What do you mean by the government has a vested interest in our children? Because that doesn't sound very...
Well, they have an interest in making sure that children have the best opportunity. Again, let's make it clear that all the social studies that are out there make it clear that children do best if they have a mother and a father involved in their lives. And there's just no denying that. Everybody knows that. Those studies are backed up over and over again. So, you know, when I talk about shrinking the government, I'm talking about the fact that the government doesn't really have a reason or a right to tell us how to educate our children. And the federal government, they don't have a right to tell us, you know, what we should preach or what we shouldn't preach. They don't have a right to tell us how to interpret the Bible or those kind of things that have been religious freedom issues that I've stood on for a long time. And then I believe that there's just some better management that we need for our federal government. Listen, if you were to bring together the people who really are experienced, business leaders even perhaps, and have them sit down and look at the federal government and put all of the pieces on the table and say, look, you know, give us, take the president of Walmart or whoever, and take these leaders of these companies and say, look at what we've got here and give us your best recommendations on how we might make this more efficient and make this more effective. We got a government that taxes too much, as I said earlier. Taxes Americans to death. It wastes too much money. There's too much duplicity that goes on in federal government. And until we get a move toward efficiency, and until we can begin to streamline some of those things, then we're going to have some problems, and we're not going to be able to correct it. This guy hasn't asked one yet. Then I'll get to those of you who already have.
How do you feel, you talk about revenue and taxation, how do you feel about the fair tax?
I believe that a fair tax is a great idea that we really need to look at. I believe in tax reform. I believe that we've got to put all the ideas on the table. I think fair tax has incredible benefits that we would see. Because bottom line, the problem in government is not that we don't have enough revenue, it's that we don't know how to control spending. And we've got to be able to get our spending under control. I don't know how it is at your house. I know how it is at my house. We can't spend more than we take in. I don't know how it is in your business. I know how it is in my business, at my church. We can't spend more than we take in. And I'm yet to understand why we think we have a government that can spend more than it takes in. And it cannot. And we've got to get that spending under control. And so I definitely think the fair tax, when you're looking at tax reform, would be a great, great piece to look at. And again, those are things that I think a lot of ideas deserve to be on the table. Now, right here and then right here.
Do you support the Bush doctrine of preventative war?
You know, when you think about where we are, I would bring that back to my question of strong foreign policy. I really do believe that, again, unless our national security is at risk, then we don't need to be even looking at war or any kind of, as you say, preventive war. I think we have to weigh out what are our national security interests, and if we don't have any national security interests and our allies that we're committed to, their national security interests are not at stake, then I don't think we need to do that.
Is oil a national security interest? Someone else's oil?
If we had a great energy policy, it wouldn't need to be. If we had an energy policy that allowed us to drill and to use the resources that we have here in our own country, then that wouldn't even be
I agree 100%.
That would.
I guess what I'm saying is to justify occupation in war, as we've been seeing, taking out governments, taking out leaders around the world, and we know that behind it all. I
believe Israel in the Middle East. That when I see them, I see that as our key ally, a democracy that is there that we must be involved with and that we must protect. But unless we see their interest, attacked, then I think we've got to step back and look at things. Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned Walmart and talking with people with business experience and getting their views on our budget and things like that. But that got me to thinking about the middle class and how it's shrinking and shrinking. And the big push that I've observed from businesses and people my age, 30s and younger, is that businesses such as Walmart, they keep hiring part-time employees, and more people are hiring part-time, and there's
that will become worse with Obamacare.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But doesn't seem like there's any incentive to not hire part-time, and when they do part-time, instead of just firing people when they don't want them around, they just decrease their hours to like 2 hours a week, 1 hour a week, and people can't live like that. And I was wondering if you had any ideas about that, or if you would address that at all if you were going to be in.
Well, I really believe that we have to allow the free market to drive the economic engine of our country, and I'm a firm believer in that. And I think that we've got to be able to free up the market to be able to do that. That it will once again employ people. Right now, we are at such a state in our country of indecision. We're at such a state of our country of confusion and frustration that it's kind of like we're just sort of in lockdown, and nobody knows what direction we're going. And that's why I cannot emphasize how important the election of 2014 is for the direction and future of our country on so many levels. I mean, I don't know if you've done the math or just imagine, but if we keep a Democratic majority in the U.S. Senate and Barack Obama is given his last 2 years with a Democratic majority in the Senate, every liberal on the Supreme Court, I would imagine that's over 70 years of age, will go ahead and resign, enabling him to appoint the more liberal and younger version of those justices. Now, I just have that in my mind I really believe the election of 2014 is about survival as much as anything, and surviving the next 2 years and somehow keeping a check as much as we can on this presidency. So that's what the first 2 years, and then, praise God, in 2016 we get a new one. I can't imagine it could be worse, but I guess I'm afraid to say. I've learned to not say that, but it could be right here. I'm sorry.
I actually have several questions that I'd like to ask you.
Okay.
And in the consideration for how much time we got, if you can answer yes, no, or I plead the fifth, that'll move this along rather nicely. And then you can go back afterwards and expound on whatever you would like. I believe that the Constitution, with the 10th Amendment, puts a lot of power to the states that is not specifically enumerated in the Constitution. Do you believe that the federal government should regulate marriage in any way, shape, or form on either side of the issue, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, you can expound on that in a minute. What federal departments would you eliminate totally?
I think we could take a look at commerce. I think you could take a look at energy. And I definitely think you would take a look at education.
Okay, I agree 100% on those.
I didn't know this was about you and me agreeing. I just thought.
Oh, no, that's fine. When you were talking earlier about shrinking government and going into the Senate, the job of senator pays $175,000 a year. And Congress, senators, representatives, presidency has become almost like American royalty in the way they exempt themselves from the laws that they pass for us, and especially when it comes to their perks. Is it fair or just, I hate to use the word fair, but is it just to have someone in a job qualify for 100% pension with 6 years of service?
No.
Okay. Would you be willing to reject the pension and retirement for the office of senator should you be elected?
I'm 47 years old. I'm about to step away from a job that has paid me well and pays retirement well as pastor of First Baptist Church, Charlotte. So you're asking me, would I be willing to step into a role that would pay me nothing in terms of retirement or pension? That's what you're asking?
Yes.
I'm going to plead the fifth. That was one of the options you gave me.
That is one of the options. When you get there, would you push to undo the retirement plan for Congress as a whole? So that they go and they serve, they get paid, and they come back to be gentlemen farmers, return to their businesses, and you don't get a dime from the public.
I would definitely make a commitment to rephrase your question again. I think you said
would you push to undo the retirement plan for Congress as a whole?
I would have no problem reviewing the retirement plan and looking to change it and undo it, is I think the word you used, in order to, as a whole, to look at it.
That's a small issue, but it's symbolic in a huge way, because it takes away that stigma that Congress is royalty.
Sure.
And one of the problems that we always, ever since I've been focused on politics, I hear people come in and they say the same things you're saying tonight. Smaller government, reduce taxes, make life better for American citizens, focus on this country. And like Richard Burr, our Republican senator, he goes up there after saying the same things and he votes consistently against the will of the people. Would you be like him? How can you assure us that you wouldn't be?
I will assure you, and this is where I say, at the end of the day, we've got to try to restore trust in the American people. And all I have to offer you tonight is my word. I have to offer you my life record of being a servant leader. I have to offer you my life and integrity, that I have convictions, and I'm not afraid to stand on those convictions, and that I am courageous, and I'm not afraid to have a backbone and be courageous. So that's what I would say to you tonight is let's look at my life, if you will. I'll throw that open to you, and that would be my word.
now you can expand upon the question that I asked first of how you believe the federal government should be involved in an issue of marriage.
The only point that I would make in that, because I personally believe that all those issues are states' rights issues, and I believe that the state needs to be able to pass its laws, and the states need that right themselves. The concern I have is when you look at the fact that we are seeing a very small minority in this nation that is pushing an agenda that is somehow trying, in an activist judiciary, that is trying to overturn even the will of the people, that may it become necessary to give the people of this country an opportunity to look at how we might even amend the Constitution, that part of DOMA that was held in place by the Supreme Court earlier this summer. I think that's something that I would at least leave on the table at this point, and to be considered if we continue to see the movement of a liberal court go to at least put it back in the hands of the people and give the people to ratify it as a constitutional amendment across the country. So that's what's behind my answer to that question, would be the only role that I would see the federal government having. It needs to be left to states, and if the courts will leave states alone and let states do what states do, then everybody be fine.
The other questions I got are all on that form, so when you fill that out,
Which one?
the one for the defund website,
Oh, yeah, okay.
so when you fill that out, I'll be looking at those too.
Super. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Right here, sir.
I was thinking about, we talked about, the Tea Party doesn't endorse a party, and it seems like if you look at the Senate and Congress too, for that matter, the way it is now, it almost feels like there is a third party. Because there's a pretty big difference between guys like Mike Lee and Ted Cruz and John McCain and Mitch McConnell. And 1992, 1996, it was largely unprecedented what happened, and we saw how the country probably changed forever with a third party in the mix, and Ross Perot, and how that essentially is how Bill Clinton became the president of the United States, not once but twice. And not to say that you
46%?
40, it was less than 50.
Yeah.
And not to say that you're a third party, but at what point would you take it as a sign? And I can fully appreciate and understand how you would definitely follow the leading of the Lord. But at what point and what sign do you think it would take for you to understand, and with kind of going back towards what Dan was saying about, Kay Hagan's going to sit down with her feet up and see what everybody else does. At what point would you take it to say, okay, the people are leaning towards this other candidate, and at what point would you come to that conclusion and give your support to another candidate? What would what would lead up to that?
I'll tell you this, I'm in this race to win, and so we plan to remain in this race to win. And I do believe that in this great republic, as we were reminded tonight that we are, that the voters will make the decision. And if there's a runoff, if any one of four candidates fail to get 40% of the vote, then the second place candidate calls for a runoff in this state. And so, if they do fail to reach that threshold, it would be at that point that I would be certainly ready to get in behind another candidate of the two, and will not be afraid to endorse a runoff should I not be one of the candidates in that runoff. You got to understand this, and I'm just speaking from the heart here, of every candidate that's running. You got people all across this state that are praying for you. You got people all across this state that are spending their hard-earned money to put into your campaign. And when you got people that care enough about what you stand for and the principles you stand on, that they're supporting you financially and they're praying for you, and they're working for you, you don't want to let them down. And it would be a very difficult decision, I would imagine, for any candidate. I know it would be for me to not finish the race that we set out on and do it right. And then again, like I said at the end, my hope is that we can all come together and we can all get behind a candidate and win with that candidate.
Please don't do that. That's what George Butterfield does. He does that all the time. Please don't do that.
Okay, I'll try to work on that.
Oh, man.
All right, we done? All right, 8 o'clock.